Some are from the construction of buildings. I've got pictures showing blocks clearly the size of those of the Giza Pyramid in the book, sitting on one corner. In fact, there's a really fascinating picture. Two of these almost identical in size, probably about each one the size of a car, balanced on a corner up on the top of the rim of the crater. How did they get there? How did they get there? They didn't get there by erosion or anything else.
Yeah.
Who formed them,
Yeah. I mean,
there's clear evidence buildings were blown apart there.
Fascinating. It's like this incredible story of, I guess, another civilization, either, destroying itself and then maybe even going to Earth, and why not? That civilization might be us or something. Who knows?
Yeah, there's an interesting phenomenon on that planet that I have no answer for. I don't think anybody could, but I call it the hole pairs. And fairly early on in examining, I don't know how many thousands of rocks I looked at for months on end. It just seemed to go on forever. But I kept finding areas where the rover wasn't even near to make a test. Because it leaves tracks pretty much everywhere it goes. They're not very deep, but they leave a very characteristic track with little, transverse lines on it from the wheels.
Yeah.
And these things are in the distance, and there's two dark features right next to each other. And I've got dozens and dozens and dozens of rocks with the same kind of sort of elliptical or elongated dark marks on them. And in a couple cases, they do appear to be holes. Well, what were they? Was it done with a probe? I can tell you there is no hole pair type tool on the rover.
Yeah.
On either rover.
Yeah.
There is a thing called the RAT, R-A-T, which stands for Rock Abrasion Tool. Leave it to NASA to come up with an acronym for it. They love acronyms. They're the alphabet soup kings of the government.
Yeah.
Hey, you should hear these guys talk. It's hardly even a word of English. It's a babble of acronyms. You listen to the ground communications with a shuttle, you hear all that.
Yeah, exactly.
And one astronaut said he had to memorize like 2 notebooks full of acronyms.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Code.
Anyway,
Yeah.
There was probably no acronym for hole in the wing from a chunk of ice. They probably didn't have one for that. Anyway.
Yeah.
The rock abrasion tool is a spinning blade, actually a pair of blades, almost like a garbage disposal, which has 2 metal parts that fly out toward the edges inside, and when it's spinning, to grind up the food. And it's like a very miniature version of it. It's just a couple, 3 inches across. It's not very big. And it grinds off the outer layer of rock so they can put the Mossbauer spectrometer up against it, which then analyzes the rock and determines what it's made out of.
Yeah. Okay,
well, this doesn't generate hole pairs. It generates little rings and circles wherever it's used. Very, very different. So, who put these features on these rocks? I mean, it's a mystery. We don't hear about this either. They don't talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
They've taken a lot of pictures of them. I can tell you that. Some of them up close. But there's clearly evidence of fossilized material present. And in many cases, you can actually see where something made an indentation in the mud, which later became rock. And there it's sitting on the surface.
Yeah. So, do you think that all of these things are stuff that they miss, that they can't, they can't edit everything out, and the people who do the brushing of these images actually miss stuff, and it's still there for us to detect?
I think that they either missed it or they let it through on purpose, one of the two.
And the latter, why would they do that, do you think?
Well, I'll tell you why. Since the 80s, it's been known that there has been a very gradual public education process going on about alien life.
Yeah.
And it's been very carefully planned and deliberate. And we went from back then about 30% of the people believe in an alien life to now it's somewhere in the order of 70-80%.
Yeah.
All right, and we can trace this kind of mentality they have to the Brookings report that dates back to, I believe it was 1950.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in that report, this think tank known as the Brookings Institution, which is still there, who knows what they're doing now, it's military thinking. They decided, they thought this out, and in the report they concluded that the revelation of life out there would cause the collapse of society as we know it. The religions would, come apart overnight and so forth. And they decided it was in the best interest not to tell anybody and to cover it up. I know Air Force guys that have read the Blue Book report. They've told me there's some really startling material in there, even though the Air Force said no evidence of life was found.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a whole other show topic. I apologize for diverging.
No problem.
But it's related, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's directly related. It's part of a very big and complex project, in many cases, to cover up and discredit people that see and find things out that they're not supposed to know. Yeah, that's really the bottom line. And they don't do it quite as bad as they used to, because now it's millions of people all over the world. It's all over the internet, and they just don't have enough people to run around making everyone's life miserable. So there's not enough.
Yeah. They're
slowly losing control of this. And at some point, somehow, it's going to come out. I can't say when, but at some point they just can't keep a lid on it forever. You just can't. It can't be done.
This is very interesting because now we're getting into the kind of levels that were the more subtle psyops almost, so to speak, depending on which way they want to go with this alien scenario, I guess, even if they want to announce that it actually is happening, or if they want to spin it somehow. But I remember I think it was NASA themselves who released this image of an astronaut walking on Mars, besides these giant monuments basically that look like kind of this Olmec or Mayan faces basically. Have you seen this?
Yeah, I might have a while back. Yeah, those did come out. And they claim they lost, I forget how many hundreds of hours of videotapes that we don't know where they went. And they were some pretty startling images on those tapes, but now they can't find them. So that created a stir a few months ago here in the States.
Yeah.
Where are these tapes?
Yeah.
Who took them, And,
was this the same regarding the tapes from the moon landing that they hadn't preserved these tapes?
Yeah, these were moon landing tapes.
Yeah.
The way you saw the moon landing on TV was crude, but that's what they did. They pointed a broadcast quality video camera of the day, which was actually a Vidicon tube camera. We didn't have CCD chips and cameras for another 15 years, 20 years.
Sure.
They pointed this at a monitor at NASA. The monitor was a high-resolution picture. It was a really high-quality image. Certainly not as good as a home video camera today, but for its time, it was actually, it's about as good as broadcast television.
Mm-hmm.
But what we saw, because you got a camera pointed at a monitor, was kind of a grainy, out-of-focus image. So what was on these other videotapes were high-quality images. And wouldn't we all like to see those?
Yeah, exactly. Then we have, people like, what was his name? Martin Stubbs, if I remember correctly, who was into videotaping all the feeds from the, NASA when they televise these things and go into commercial, I guess they continue broadcasting on other channels. They're keeping a channel open, and I mean he has filmed a lot of interesting stuff there too. So I guess what you're saying is that they still have, they broadcast this stuff and people can pick up on it, and it feels like the security is very bad even at NASA, considering the latest hacker. I can't remember his name right now, but this was during the summer where he had used kind of Windows, what you call it, remote desktop type thing, where he accessed NASA's computers, and it feels like really bad securities. I mean, is there an intention here to kind of make people, access this material for some reason?
I think some of it's incompetence, because I worked with them, and frankly, I don't know how they get anything into orbit. I mean, it's like I shake my head, like I can't believe you're doing what you're doing. I just can't. I mean,
yeah.
They violate a lot of good engineering rules and basic procedures and methods. And I mean, this is how bad it was when they first sent the 2 rovers to Mars. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought this was just deplorable. They were running on Java. All right. Now, how many times have we seen JavaScript errors? I mean, it's as bad as anything.
Yeah.
And so somebody rewrote some code, and they uploaded it, not to one rover, but to both of them, because they were so sure of themselves. Now, the rest of us would try it on one first before we did it to the other.
Yeah.
But not them. As a result, they lost communication with the rovers. And in one press conference I watched on NASA's contract channel on satellite, there was a panel of very young engineers, because remember, all the experienced, good engineers left the agency in the early 70s when Apollo was over and they went through endless budget cutbacks. There are many locked and dark offices throughout NASA's buildings. I can tell you that. I've seen them, floor after floor offices that are dark and empty. And anyway, they didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
All right, these young engineers, they just didn't have the experience and the type of training that engineering people used to get back in the 50s and 60s, which was use your head. So they sent these vehicles up and uploaded new software, and the software crashed, and they almost lost control. And guess what they did to solve the problem?
No, I don't know.
Their own admission was they had to bring several engineers out of retirement to help them solve the problem.
There we
go.
They
said this. They saved the mission for them.
Yeah.
They showed them how to reboot the code and get the 2 vehicles back into a mode where they could receive data again and fix the problem. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, there's no excuse for this.
No. And these are multi-million, billion-dollar projects, I guess. Also.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one NASA administrator, it was O'Keefe, it was one of them, who was questioned about the whole